Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regularly scheduled school board meeting for August the 12th. We have our agenda in front of us, and we also have all members present, so we do have a quorum. At this time, we'd like to move to 2.01, and the chair will now entertain a motion to approve the agenda. We have a motion.
I will so move.
Moved by Mr. Blayne. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Gramp. Any discussion? We'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved 7-0. Moving to 3.0, to close meeting, 3.01. Let it be resolved that the board conduct a closed meeting for the following purposes: consideration of candidates for employment, assignment, promotion, demotion, and discipline of employees, or resignation of employees who have a contractual commitment to the board as permitted by 2-2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, consideration of student disciplinary appeals as permitted by Section 2.2-3711A2 of the Code of Virginia, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel as permitted by Section 2.2-3711A8 of the Code of Virginia, and discussion of plans to protect public safety as it relates to terrorist activity or specific cyber security threats or vulnerabilities, and briefings by staff members, legal counsel, or law enforcement or emergency service officials concerning actions taken to respond to such matters or a related threat to public safety as permitted by Section 2-2-3711A19 of the Code of Virginia. The chair will now entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Dr. Meyer. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Shelley. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we are now in closed session. Vote is 7-0. Can I have your attention, please? Can I have your attention, please? Chair now entertain a motion to re-enter open session.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Dr. Meyer, seconded by Mr. Twigg. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. We are back in open session. Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting. We'll call for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Blayne to certify. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Meyer. We'll call a roll call vote. Ms. Shelley?
Shelley, aye.
Meyer, aye.
Phelps, aye.
Twig eye.
Blayne, aye.
Gramp, aye.
Braswell, aye. Motion carries 7-0. We are now at recess. The time that I have is 6:33. We will, oh, thank you. We'll move to 5.01. Item from closed meetings, from the closed meeting, Dr. Martin. Thank you.
The motion is that the school board accepts the recommendation of the superintendent for personnel appointments, assignments, and resignations as presented and discussed in closed meeting and permitted by Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Do we have a motion? Moved by Ms. Shelley, seconded by Ms. Grant. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. The time that I have now is 6:34. We will go into recess until 6:45 and then begin the meeting at that point. We are now in recess. School board meeting for the August the 12th, and we are excited that our school year has begun once again, and we're so glad that you're here with us this evening. We'd ask that you would take this opportunity to put your phone either on silent or turn them off so as not to disturb our meeting. We have Ms. Shelley will lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we will commence with the meeting. If you would please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ms. Shelley. There is no public hearing this evening. We're going to move on to the consent agenda, 9.01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 9.06. In that order, Dr. Martin.
On the consent agenda this evening are the minutes of the July 8th, 2019 regular board meeting and the July 23rd, 2019 special meeting. Donations, which are usual and customary. Approval of bus service on private roads for the following homeowner associations and daycare providers: YMCA, Old Greenwich, and Carriage Hill. Approval of Cortland High School renovation project, change orders number 15, 16, 17, and 18 for a total cost of $70,437. The sole source purchase of licenses for Lexia Learning instructional materials to provide intervention for all elementary and middle school students for the 2019 through 2020 school year at a cost of $268,000 from the instruction category of the budget. And fiscal year 2020 budget amendment number 1. Category transfer of funds between instruction and technology categories of the budget to comply with the Virginia Department of Education's account code structure, requiring purchases to be coded to technology and instruction purchases to be coded to instruction. Staff asks that the school board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Do we have a motion?
I will make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve by Ms. Shelley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Gramp. Any questions?
I have a couple questions. On the meeting minutes that are attached to our files, I would like to make a motion to modify and correct those meeting minutes to reflect the individual school board member comments and discussions, and to have them in the September 9th board meeting. There are, and that's it. That's what I'd like to do.
What is missing in particular?
So there's comments from the individual school board members that are on tape, but they're not included in the meeting minutes.
Okay. What I think we're gonna need to do is consider the consent agenda and remove 9.01, and that we would have an opportunity to address the issue of the minutes in new business. So could we have a new motion?
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda items without the minutes.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve without minutes. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Gramp. Any discussion?
I have another discussion. The 9.04, the Cortland High School change orders, I'd like to have a discussion on that.
So we're going to, you want to pull 9.04. So we're pulling, you want to pull 9.01 and you want to pull 9.04.
And I'd like to pull 9.05 also.
Okay, 9.01, 9.04, and 9.05 in new business. Now we have a motion on the floor. We have to go to those that offered the motion if they would like to redact or amend their motion to include that. So, Ms. Shelley, I'm going to you since you made the motion.
Absolutely. I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed without 9.01, 9.04, and 9.05. Is that correct?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And do we have a second? Second by Ms. Gramp. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to informational items are there for your use. We'll move on to, we have no instructional highlights, nor do we have any recognition or awards. So now we are at 13.01, public comments. Dr. Martin. Dr. Martin.
I'm coming, so here you go. The public comment segment of our board meetings is a time to receive recommendations, suggestions, concerns, and comments from the general public. Each speaker is allotted 5 minutes, and we ask that they clearly state their name, address, and/or voting district for the board. A speaker may request additional time from the board should one's 5-minute allotment expire. We ask that you keep your comments focused on the issues and that all speakers maintain a level of decorum and mutual respect for one another. Our first speaker is Catherine Palmer.
Good evening, all. Catherine Palmer, 9915 Grass Market Court. I had originally planned to cover some random topics tonight, so I'm going to start there. First, I'd like to thank and congratulate you for updating policy to require that school web pages be accessible. Making online resources accessible to people with disabilities, particularly those with vision or hearing impairments, is required by the law, and it's the right, the kind, and the engaging thing to do. I urge you, however, to consider additional funds for training around web accessibility. Making a web page accessible requires some expertise, or at least the development of some very specific guidelines for your school-based web curators. I hope you can find the funds necessary to support the staff who do the work, as we all know that the stipend they receive is minimal if they even get one. My second item is this. On May 13th, I emailed my school board representative to say that I felt that her use of social media was limiting my rights as a constituent as well as the rights of any constituent who is not her Facebook friend. I'm blocked completely. Others I know are blocked, and those who are only friends with the page cannot comment or ask questions. Pardon me, only those who are friends can comment or ask questions. If you're not a friend, you can't chime in. I received no response at all from my elected representative. A few days after the email, the page's About statement was edited to remove the mention of her position on the board. This could be coincidence, but it seems to me that it indicates my email was in fact received. By creating and maintaining a second personal page and by publishing school information mixed in with other community information, she has essentially created a public forum. A public forum hosted by an elected official is required to be open to all constituents. There are very few circumstances that allow an elected official to block a constituent, and none of those circumstances apply to me personally or to the many other people I know who are blocked. Social media use by elected officials has been in the news lately, with case law coming down on the side of the constituent. At the recent VSBA training that my representative and others attended, there was a roundtable session specifically dedicated to this topic, so my representative should be aware of the issue. According to the attorney who presented that information, a Facebook page does not have to be labeled as an official page in order to be subject to the rules of a public forum. But if one is sharing school information, especially information that one has access to solely because of their position, for example, the names of new principals that haven't been announced staff-wide yet, and if one is answering questions on a page where only their friends can ask, that is silencing constituents, and I believe it is wrong. And I urge Ms. Phelps to change the way she uses social media to be transparent. Finally, regarding the hot topic, the stolen payment, I simply ask that citizens be patient as the crime is investigated. We need to respect our law enforcement. We need to respect the sheriff, the state police, and the FBI and let them do their job. We can't be getting in their way. And regarding the furor over approving turf, I'd like to point out that last spring, this board spent 25 minutes discussing the cost, discussing priorities, and asking questions of staff about the turf, all of which were answered. At the end of that due diligence, the vote was 7-0 to approve the turf specifically. I'm not a huge fan of turf, but I've been paying attention, and I believe that you, all 7 of you, have considered the issue carefully and voted according to your beliefs. Thank you for your time and the opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, that's the only person that signed up.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Please, sir.
I'm Alfred King, 11102 Fawn Lake Parkway in the Livingston District. It's with a heavy heart that I come before you tonight. Several years ago, I was active in the Citizens Budget Committee, and we made a recommendation that the school hire an internal auditor. In your judgment, this apparently was not a priority item, and I think we're paying the price for that currently. However, it's not too late. The kinds of issues that an internal auditor deals with are ongoing. And if we look forward, I think that the school board can make amends for the fact that you didn't have an auditor if you go down that path currently. It's sort of interesting that a much, much smaller public organization, the Rappahannock Area Community Service Board, just advertised for an internal auditor this week, and I have the job posting here. I'd like to read the principal duties of the internal auditor as the RACSB put it, but based on my 50 years of financial experience and management, the items listed are absolutely standard for an internal audit function. 1, develop the annual audit work plan. 2, conduct agency-wide risk assessments to assess organizational risk and focus on high-risk areas. That might strike a responsive area right now. Plan and execute financial, operational, and compliance audits to determine the effectiveness of internal controls, efficiency of operations, and the level of compliance with applicable statutes, rules, procedures, policies, and regulations. Prepare audit reports in accordance with professional auditing standards. Create and maintain end-user reports for analysis of information contained in the financial system. Interface with external auditors to provide pertinent financial data. Assist in the development, implementation, and monitoring of financial policies and procedures. And in this case, they want to provide backup assistance to the accounting department, although that is not a standard item. This internal auditing posting for the RACSB, they've had a job minimum salary of $58,000. In my judgment, this is way low. I believe that to get the right kind of individual, you should budget something in the order of $100,000 to $125,000 to get a really competent internal auditor with the requisite experience. Such an auditor may not have prevented the problems that you're facing now. But I guarantee you that without an internal auditor in the future, you're going to face similar problems in the future. Rather than wait until the preparation for the 2020-21 budget is prepared, I suggest that you begin immediately trying to identify an individual for the position of internal auditor and pay for that individual for the current fiscal year out of resources which I know you have. $125,000 out of a $300 million budget is not an item that should be questioned. So I urge you, please, seriously consider hiring an internal auditor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the board? Anyone else in the audience that would like to address the board? Thank you. At this time, public hearing is now closed. We'll go to board member comments. We're going to start from the inside out, and we'll start with Ms. Phelps and then Mr. Twigg and alternate throughout. Ms. Phelps.
Sure. Just one comment on the recent issues facing our board. Our school division's loss of more than $500,000 by fraud is stunning to me, as I'm certain it is to all of us. And this loss via fraud is the order of magnitude of greater than any of the those previously suffered by either our school division or our county government. And I look forward to continued and full reporting and even confidential if necessary from Dr. Baker, so that we can get back on track with our operations and processes and even enhance them in small ways or ways that we need to, particularly associated with finance and accounting, and even more to the implementation of measures to prevent any reoccurrence of such an event in the future. And I too am all over the internal auditor, and I've been touting that for over 2 years, and I think we need to prioritize that, probably even with funds that we recover here over the next month. So we'll discuss that, but I certainly concur with the prioritization of an internal auditor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. Ms. Phelps.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Woo woo! Happy back to school day. Anyway, welcome everybody here to the meeting also. So, I just have a couple things to say, and I know that I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and so be it. That's the way it is. I need to say that the reason why I ran for school board, I was a parent, and I was getting tired of being kept in the dark. And since being elected, I've been fighting for cooperation, for spending transparency. Once I started to dig and found out the funds were not being used effectively, I knew I wanted to right the ship so the teachers and the staff would be receiving fair treatment, and parents and children would be comfortable knowing that they would be receiving a fair, balanced, quality education. Unbeknownst to me, it's still difficult, as sitting up here as a representative, to get straight answers from straight questions that I ask. The lack of providing the information, the lack of transparency, is a major stumbling block for equal representation. Parents should not need to FOIA information for what should be public information and then charged outrageous fees in order to discourage them from getting information. The misappropriation of the $600,000 has caused me to doubt our school system's ability to manage our tax dollars. The CEO of this business, which happens to be the superintendent, has the responsibility to show me and the public what actions were taken to hold the person accountable for this enormous $600,000 misfortune. And I don't take it lightly. And I wanted to share that so it's publicly, so it's on record, so it is in the minutes for next month's meeting. And that's all I have to share.
Dr. Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a couple comments because of what's been presented in the paper in an op-ed that I find are not factual. I find that the information that was presented in an op-ed had misinformation, and I'd like to correct it. One statement was that the Board of Supervisors was informed a month after a fraudulent payment. Not true. Immediately after the scam occurred, Dr. Baker informed the Sheriff's Office and each board member and the county administrator and emphasized that this is confidential information due to an ongoing investigation. As soon as the state police said that a statement could be issued, a joint statement by the superintendent and the county administrator was prepared and released on August the 5th. Another statement, the school board did not involve the public to hear citizen concerns about the turf field. Not true. Since 2014, there have been multiple public hearings on the capital improvement plan each year by the school board and by the Board of Supervisors. Another statement, the $500,000 settlement to a different company for a breach of cleaning contract. Well, that part is true, but it was not, I emphasize not, a waste of money. It was money owed for work completed. The settlement saved the county several $100,000. Why wasn't that mentioned? Is saving county taxpayers a waste of money? The $1.1 million of taxpayer dollars wasted was another statement. It included the $500,000 contract settlement and the $600,000 fraudulent payment. Again, repeating, the $500,000 was owed. The $600,000 is not a waste of funds, and I do not consider it misappropriation, but a crime committed for which the investigation is ongoing, and the criminals, once apprehended, will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Another statement, Spotsy budget is greater than Stafford budget with 5,000 more students. Not true. When comparing budgets from different school divisions, it is critical that the same components are included in the comparison. Such items as debt service, food service, grants, and CIP funding. I looked up the Table 15 on the Department of Ed website for the superintendent's annual report for FY18 last year. Last year was the last year it was posted. True, Stafford has 5,309 more students. That part is correct. But Stafford's operating budget on that table 15 is approximately $38,700,000 greater than Spotsy. Another statement, the FY20 budget passed by the school board with no cuts, no adjustments. Again, not true. The FY20 budget had to be reduced by approximately 100 positions and the salary increase reduced from 5% to 4% so we could have a balanced budget. Another statement, independent auditor refused by the school board. Not true. The idea of an independent audit, the school board and the supervisors utilized the same auditing firm, which was selected jointly. An internal auditor was discussed at several joint meetings, and the school board expressed support at those joint meetings, but no funding had been assigned or approved. And without the funding, it can't happen. Another statement, the school board should use carryover funds to buy turf fields or band uniforms or classroom supplies. The school board already uses carryover funds for school supplies, textbooks, and classroom software. Band uniforms are included in the approved budget. Because turf fields were funded through bonds, why would the school board utilize carryover funds for fields when those funds came from instruction? Most of the carryover is redirected toward instructional purposes. It should also be pointed out that the use of carryover funds is presented to the school board by the superintendent staff, reviewed by the county finance committee, then presented to the Board of Supervisors for appropriation with an itemized listing of intended uses to include paying down our OPEB obligations. The school board meets in joint work session with the supervisors who ask questions for clarification and have improved each year the intended uses. These are some of the statements that I wanted to make clear to clarify, because when information is presented in op-ed and it is not clear, it is not exact, it is not, many of the statements are not true, I think it's misinformation being given to the public and gives the wrong impression of what this school division is doing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Blayne.
I'm going to take a little different approach, and I'd like to share some experiences that I've had that I think might be appropriate. From time to time, there's a newspaper article on establishing a different funding system for Virginia schools, and I would like to see, frankly, a much better system than we now have. Our children are our most important possession. The education they receive is a critical factor that will determine their role as adults. The Virginia Constitution assigns responsibility to the elected school board to educate our almost 23,705 children. Yet it assigns responsibility for financing that education to the Board of Supervisors. This is made to order conflict. Just made to order. I'm in hopes that the movement to revise our Virginia funding system will grow and result in a better system for funding our schools. I'd like to share my 14 years of prior school board experience with you. About 1,300 students were in a high school on which board I served in Illinois for 14 years. And I want to share that experience. Illinois has a voter-centered system. It places local funding responsibilities squarely in the hands of the voter. Just as we pass a referendum for certain types of funding, the Illinois system requires that the school board pass a referendum periodically asking voters to approve funding up to some maximum amount of money. Once the level is established, the school board has authority to raise or lower taxes up to that stipulated amount on an annual basis. If the school board finds additional funds are needed beyond the established amount, it must call for a referendum asking the voters to approve a higher amount. This means that when the voter elects a school board member, they give that member, along with other board members, the authority to determine the annual school budget up to the established maximum approved in the last referendum. There's no need for consultation or anything else. They have a cap that's there waiting for the school boards to act locally. Direct voter control is the strength of this, and I want to repeat that, direct voter control is the strength of this system. It creates voter-elected school board members who have a common focus, that of maximizing the educational opportunities for their children. The school board member has one focus, providing the education for our children that the voters stipulate at election time. The board member's focus is on hiring the school superintendent and setting and enforcing school board policy. In Virginia, each school division, 7 locally elected school board members and a superintendent would have the responsibility of providing a truly high level of educational experience for each of our children. But it puts control right where we really want it, in the hands of the voter, so that we as a school board would always be directly responsible to that group and not to some other group. In our case, the problem with the school board elected and the county board completely separate. I'd like to suggest that when you see movements happening in our state for this change in at the state level, that you consider this little short statement I made. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Blayne. Ms. Shelley.
Thank you. Dr. Meyer covered a lot of what I wanted to say, so I'm just going to say, well, first of all, happy first day of school. I know you were all exhausted. I started a new teaching position today, and I am going to do a shout out to paraeducators right now, because if I did not have, thank you, good job. I have quite a few paraeducators in my classroom. I am now teaching a severe intellectually disabled high school class. And I want to say that the paraeducators in my classroom were absolutely amazing. If it wasn't for them today, I don't know if I'd have made it through the day, because they are just go-getters. They're taking care of the students. They know what they're doing. And I've always just honored our paraeducators, but after today, I know more of what they do, and God bless them. So I know everybody out there, most everyone out there has worked a full day in school, and now you're here. So thank you very much for your time. Okay, now going on with some misinformation that was posted in the newspaper. And it was an opinion piece, and it even said that. So what I want to read is, this is dictionary.com, opinion. A belief or judgment that rests on grounds insufficient to produce complete certainty. A personal view, attitude, or appraisal. The formal expression of a professional judgment. And then a fact. Something that actually exists, reality, truth. Something known to exist or have to it happen. A truth known by actual experience or observation. Now I'm going to Urban Dictionary. False fact. It is an opposite of a true fact. It's an artifact built on, sorry, it just went away, a true fact, as opposed to those being tricksy, false fact. someone believes, sorry, this just, there we go. An artifact, an anti-fact, my glasses are not strong enough, built on believing of someone about something or created to diminish the role of a true fact. As Dr. Meyer pointed out, there were many points of misinformation in an opinion piece that was put into the newspaper. So just reminding people there is a difference between an opinion piece that puts out some misinformation and the facts. And then also, once again, as Dr. Meyer said, there was no misappropriation of $600,000. We had a crime committed against the school division and the taxpayers of Spotsylvania County. Absolutely, it's against the taxpayers of Spotsylvania County. It was a crime. Money was stolen from us, all of us here in Spotsylvania County. And I'm not denying that it was against the taxpayers. But it was not a misappropriation. There is an investigation that is being done by the state police with support from our local, wonderful sheriff's department here in Spotsylvania County. And while the investigation is going, to accuse anyone for any wrongdoings is absolutely wrong. If after the investigation is completed, if we find out that any of our people did anything maliciously or true negligence, they will be handled at that point in time. But to point fingers before an investigation is committed, then I just think that's jumping the gun. So I thank you all. And one day down, 179 to go. I know we're praying for snow, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Ms. Graham.
We're going to have some overlap this evening, but all the information I share tonight has been cleared by officials. I made sure of it. July 19th, a payment was sent to a vendor who had done work for the schools. That payment was found to be fraudulent, and law enforcement was notified on July 24th. On July 25th, both the school board and the board of supervisors were made aware. Less than 2 weeks later, the political grandstanding began. There's an open police investigation on this issue. I trust the police to conduct a thorough, in-depth investigation that will lay out exactly what happened, and then we will move swiftly to fix the issues. This is not about a blue turf field that no extra fees were paid for to make it blue. This is not about a whistleblower. The schools reported a crime to the authorities. This is not about transparency. This is about politicians who think they know better than the police and have put an investigation in jeopardy. This is about the lack of integrity from Mr. McLaughlin and a board member on this board. Not only did they leak that a theft had occurred, but Supervisor McLaughlin had put it out to the general public, completely false information. A payment was made, a crime was discovered, and authorities were notified. It did not take a month to notify the Board of Supervisors about the crime. It took a day. The county and the schools are audited by an independent agency each year. Results are public record, and a presentation at a joint session with the findings is televised each year. The supervisors hold the purse strings. If they feel so strongly that we need more audits besides the ones we already do, when did they motion for more audits? Never. The school board has never said no to an audit. The schools and the Board of Supervisors discussed the need for independent auditor on staff in the work session April 29th, 2018. As patterned for Mr. McLaughlin, no funding for the position appeared and no position on the county side either. No motion at all. The Board of Supervisors also has a Citizen Budget Review Committee. This committee is made up of citizens appointed by the Board of Supervisors to review the budget's spending and come up with recommendations for the Board of Supervisors. To date, the CBRC has not found any waste in the school budget, and the recommendations for an internal auditor has not been funded for school or county. The schools have answered their questions over the years, spending hundreds of man-hours to explain, answer in depth. There is complete transparency in our school system's budget. You just have to know where to look for it. It is online. The crime. Authorities will let you know what occurred and how to prevent it in the future when the investigation concludes, which is why confidentiality is essential in order to not compromise the integrity of the case. Conflating a theft with a legitimate public function of government spending is a slimy way to grandstand. Contrary to what was published in a recent op-ed, hearings were held in 2014 on the school's CIP. The artificial turf was number 3 on the frequently asked questions list published with the bond literature. At least 7 Q&A meetings around the county were held prior to the vote in 2014. The public did have input. The school board did due diligence to address concerns of the public, and it was 5 years until the first field was installed. The turf has been included in the CIP, easily found on the school's website, since the voters' approval. It has been approved each year by every sitting board member on each board at some time, as well as approved by the voters since it was specifically listed in the bond literature as item 3. In fact, just last year, Supervisor McLaughlin made the motion for the approval of the school's CIP on May 22nd, 2018. The motion passed 6-1. He voted for it. He also declared that we should install all 5 fields in the same year. The school board budget and other financial documents are published online. The fiscal year begins on July 1st, and the budget is online by September. Hard copies are available if asked. This timeline is the same for most systems due to the size and the timeline from state funding. Because the state does not have final numbers to the schools until July, the numbers are not input into the budget. Then the budget takes time to get in the final process to put online. I know this is a lot of information, but I have to address these ridiculous and false claims from the Chancellor Supervisor. He asked where the money goes. We tell him each year, but since he misses so many joint meetings, the money goes into pay, benefits, and additional mandated positions. CIP money goes into technology, buses, facilities. That's where the money goes. They are detailed, colorful graphs presented each year for him to read. Despite the alternate facts shared recently in the local news source that has become a source of partisan gossip instead of ethical journalism, the fact remains Spotsylvania County Public Schools is still in the bottom third in the state of per-pupil expenditures in Virginia. The local transfer as a percentage of general fund revenue is decreasing every year under their watch. And we so operate on a bare-bones level in administration, we rank in the bottom 2% of administrator to pupil ratio in the state. We are, however, fully accredited. Academic successes improve each year, and we have the superintendent of the year as the school division's leader. If you fell for this political ploy, by the supervisor candidate and also current supervisor and chancellor, that was all a scheme to distract the public from his S-Power vote and from the fact that his property attorney was the attorney for S-Power, that's okay. It's not unreasonable to expect a newspaper to report facts. But now that you know, all I ask from the public is that you question facts. Look them up. Ask someone. Ask someone else. Get more than one opinion. Get more than one source. Demand more from your local representatives. Demand honesty. Demand performance. Demand that they don't share confidential information during a criminal investigation. Demand they don't operate an anonymous Facebook page that spews lies. For heaven's sake, you can even expect a reasonable attendance record. Expect that the people you will vote for will uphold their oath of office and execute all of their duties in an impartial manner. Impartial manner. That is in our oath of office. Expect it.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. I'll close with my comments. First of all, I want to remind everyone that on the 21st of September this year at Cortland, we'll have our 14th annual race against teen violence at Cortland High School. We once again will have a friendly school challenge where we offer awards of $1,000 for first place for high school, middle school, and elementary school, $500 for second place in each division, and $250 for third place in each division. So all that's required is that you put the name of your school at the bottom of the application, and then turn that in, and we'll keep a tally of it. And the schools that place will have a banquet and then award the cash awards to those principals. It's always an exciting time where a lot of our citizens get together and we have a good time together without any issues of teen violence or any other nonsense, if you will. With that being said, I'm going to ask all politicians that are running for office that it's a no politic zone. There will be no signs. They'll be picked up if you have signs out there. But you can wear your T-shirts, you can wear your buttons, you can shake hands, but we just ask that the emphasis be placed on the message that's going forth about treating each other kindly. Now, let me shift gears and address a concern that I have as well. I've heard some of my board members discuss it in terms of the recent news and the op-ed that was written by one of the supervisors. I'm really saddened by the fact that the op-ed was written. If you could imagine with me that you are at a crime scene, and around the crime scene there is a yellow tape that's always wrapped around that scene, and the police want to keep people from entering the crime scene because they don't want the evidence to become compromised. They don't want the evidence to become contaminated. They don't want anyone to disturb the evidence so that they can adequately determine who the perpetrators of the crime were, and then apprehend them and hopefully return back the stolen property or stolen goods. Well, we were instructed through a briefing, all of us as political officials, to keep our mouths shut, to maintain confidentiality, to allow the police and the sheriff's department to do their job without creating a hindrance to the investigation. And we did poorly. We had people that could not hold their water run out to the news media to pass out information that would provide the perpetrators of the crime information to operate in a way that possibly would prevent us from capturing them. Some might say that these people that provided this information possibly, and I'll say possibly, could be unwitting accomplices after the fact. We have a sacred responsibility to uphold the public trust, and sometimes that means that we have to put our politics on hold so that we can do what's in the best interest of our community. That wasn't done, and to me that's a disappointment. I'm also concerned in that we had several accusations made about the process in which we do business, specifically the field and how it was procured. Every member on this board knew not only about the field turf that's being installed, not just at Cortland, but at all 5 schools. But we all voted affirmatively to have it. There are some other reasons why we should we could always debate on the economic advantages to it, but we all knew about it. And that same information was presented to the Board of Supervisors. That vote came out 6-1. Only person that voted against it was Mr. Yakubowski, and the reason he voted against the CIP was because of some transportation concerns that he felt weren't being addressed. But no one of the 14 elected officials voted no to the turf. And to act as though that is somehow a new concern is beyond me. Now, I understand that what was committed against us was a great crime. And yeah, the crime was taken from monies that were allocated for the fields. But if the crime was committed against projects, for example, buses, would we consider not driving our kids to school in a bus? Or if it was against our HVAC system, would we consider letting our kids sit in a hot classroom? Obviously not. That's nonsense. And some of the information that's being put out in the media is absolute, utter nonsense. This school division has been more than transparent in all of its transactions. Dr. Baker, I commend you because it takes to perform in a way where you're open and transparent when there's a time of crises. That is more indicative of a person's character than when things are going well. So I salute you for that, sir, in spite of what others on this board might think. I plan to address the issue even further. I'm in the process of preparing an op-ed myself so that the citizens can get the real facts about the matter. There's plenty of time for politicking. There really is. We're only in the middle of August. There's plenty of time for politicking. But this is a crime. This is not a political hot potato to play games with. We're going to catch the perpetrator of the crime. We're going to try to get back as much of the money that we can possibly get back. And then we're going to go in a prudent way, develop processes so that we don't allow for this to happen again. My father-in-law passed away recently, and he lives in South Carolina. My wife was in South Carolina, and I had to come back because she had to stay for a while. And when I was on my way back, my wife checked the computer and asked me if I was having dinner at the Green Turtle in Baltimore. I said, absolutely not. I'm in Spotsylvania. She said, have you been riding the Uber? I said, no, I have not. Well, somewhere down the line, somebody hacked into my credit card, and I didn't know that they did it, and I surely didn't hand it over for them to hack into it. But it was done. The level of sophistication of these criminals is changing each and every day. And so I just say that to you in this way, that we all have to be vigilant, and we are living in a new era. But the last thing we need to do is recognize that we're not dealing with a crime. I finished my comments, Dr. Baker. Your time is available.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. I wanted to first, before I will also make a few comments and statements regarding the cybersecurity crime that impacted our school system. But I wanted to first just say that this was and it's a knock on wood, but I think we're in the clear, a wonderful opening day for our school system. tremendous. Back in June, I believe it was June, we ended earlier this year. Back in June, we had a leadership learning exchange, and two big topics that we continue to cover as a school system and really rally together about. One is family engagement, and the other one is making sure that our students are engaged in visible learning, in learning that is meaningful to them, that is relevant, and that they know not only what they're learning, but why they're learning it, and they know how they'll know that they've learned it based on what they can produce. And over the summer, I've never seen, and maybe it was because we had actually 3 extra weeks based on last summer, but I've never seen folks work as hard as this staff worked all year long. And it was not just principals who were, some of them going out and visiting families in record heat waves, but were doing weekend work to try to beautify the grounds. And I saw this across the school system. And I think the idea that families don't just drop their kids off in our schools, I'm so proud of how we've embraced the idea that we can do even more to actually engage them in the process of providing that education, and to be able to see so many signs of that. I also don't think folks realize, I always have to remind them how large we are as a school system and the volume of everything. The volume of maintenance requests, the volume of transportation. We're a sprawling county. How much folks have to do by themselves each and every day. And I see all of the work that's been done in maintenance and transportation, and to see us have what looked like a great kickoff today. And I know that not everything went perfect. I know that some folks were unhappy, and unfortunately, if I haven't already by tomorrow, we'll hear about those. But I also heard a great deal of positive feedback, and we embrace continuous improvement, and I know that we're going to continue to focus on that work. But I want to thank all of our staff and our community for helping us to have a great start to the school year. Excuse me, if I need to put my glasses on for a second. A lot has been shared recently about the crime that was perpetrated against our school system, and I want to start out and thank a few folks first. Over the last couple of weeks, we have, and I and a few of my staff members, have really done nothing except focus on this matter. It is it's a serious matter. It's also one that makes all of us individually and collectively sick to our stomachs, because it's just one of those things, if you have it, we take the public's trust very seriously. But one of the things that has occurred, well, really two. The first is I want to thank Mr. Ed Petrovich, who's the county administrator. The way that he and his staff have reached out the hand to us, given that even though it was a much, much smaller amounts of funds, to be willing to say, we want to work with you. We've had it happen to us on a smaller scale, and let's partner in trying to address it for the future. That has been extremely helpful, and we've already come together and formed an internal task force on the matter of making not only our financial systems more or less susceptible to any further cyber crimes, but really across the board working together to shore up those systems the best that we can. I do want to address the second thing that has meant a lot to me, and yeah, I don't want to get emotional. I can't talk about it, so I won't. I do really appreciate that the majority of folks that I heard from reached out in support, in prayer for not only me, but our school system, and yeah, I have felt it. I also want to read something to everyone here. First, if I ever find that we have not done something that we're supposed to, I will address it. And if folks need someone to blame, I always will take that. And I didn't realize until really the last couple weeks that that would be a weakness to be exploited. But as much as I hate appearing vulnerable right now, the people and the kids of this county and school system, they mean everything to me. Enough of that. The type of crime that was committed against us, we have had in closed doors meetings. We've realized that it wasn't just your typical phishing scam, and even though some information has been released, we didn't want to appear to not be transparent, but at the same time, we did not want to do anything to potentially compromise the opportunity for those funds to be fully restored. And our law enforcement, both locally and at the state, have been simply superlative, and we have had a great working relationship with them over the last couple of weeks. And today, we plan, probably following this meeting, to put out a statement that will, again, provide some update to our community about the progress that has been made. And they have given us permission to share it. And I do think it's important. It's a little bit more than what was shared when we put out a statement a week ago. The Virginia State Police has and continues to make significant progress with this ongoing criminal investigation. In order for our special agents to be as thorough as possible and to pursue this case to its fullest extent, we are asking for patience. A white-collar crime of this complexity can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to resolve. This was a sophisticated phishing scheme that specifically targeted and victimized the school system. As a result, the state police has requested that the school division and county not release any specifics related to the case, as additional details would likely jeopardize the ongoing investigation and progress made to date. So we are certainly encouraged that they are indicating that they have made progress. And the one thing I can't provide specifics on is how both we and the county are specifically addressing ways to better safeguard against this for the future. The one thing that I can say with great certainty, it has received our continued keen and continual focus over the last few weeks. I also want to thank both of the folks that spoke tonight to provide some feedback. I know Mr. King has left. I appreciated that he actually laid out what an internal auditor job description looks like. I appreciate that. One of my first years as superintendent, I know we had initially put that position in, and I think he was appreciated what he said about, while it's not another fail-safe, I would certainly and continue to be open to any way to bolster our staff. Right now, we have folks that continue to have such volume and not necessarily enough capacity. But to give folks a brief history on that, and I understand these things can be cyclical, but when I first started as superintendent, what I heard from folks, and some of the same folks that will now say we need to bolster finance staff or internal auditor, was that there was too much money in administration in central office, and that we needed to put money in the schools and in the classrooms. And while I knew that that was a very broad stroke, one of the things that we committed to, was to make sure that our schools and classrooms had every possible resource before we put something in at the division level. And in fact, the very first budget that I oversaw and the board approved was one that cut over 1.2, 1.3 million from nothing but division level staff. And so when I hear that the money does not go where it's supposed to, obviously that is hurtful, and especially when you know that it's not accurate. But I do appreciate how hard our staff works and the results that we get on a pretty lean running machine. And so I hope that that has helped some folks. I also want to thank folks that do reach out to me and know that my door is always open. I'll come to a community and talk, and I know most of my staff and our elected officials are the same. Finally, I didn't have, throughout these past couple weeks, but especially this past week, I didn't have anyone call me as a parent or a concerned citizen or contact me by email. I only received support. I know that there was another world going on, which is one of the reasons I was getting nice feedback. There was something that would have been like a horror film for me if I watched it on social media. But I just want the folks in this community to know that your support and your advocacy is never taken for granted. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. We're going to move on to 14.01, Board Committee Reports. Do we have any Board Committee Reports? Anyone? Anyone? I'd just like to say, as far as Cortland High School is concerned, Mr. Conway gave me a quick tour this morning, and they did an excellent job in getting the school ready for the first day. And there's some really beautiful changes that have been made. And I also want to tip my hat to Mr. Rusty Davis for his work all year long. I went out a couple days ago. I was on a Saturday, and I was showing my wife the field, and Mr. Davis was out there doing some work, and he's been working hard all summer long. Every time I've been in the area, he's been actively engaged. So it's not often, Mr. Davis, that you get a lot of props, but you're getting it tonight from me, and I salute you, sir. Good job. Superintendent reports. Do we have any superintendent reports?
Yes, sir, we do. I'd like to ask Dr. Carol Flenard to come up. She's going to share some preliminary accountability and accreditation results. But I'd like to kind of set the stage just very briefly with the board. I think we're getting to a point where we can speak pretty honestly and openly about the state of accountability and accreditation in our state. I think we have the right idea, but we continue to have the wrong methodology in many ways. As we promote pathways and workforce readiness and skills that are applicable to both postgraduate work and the trades and the careers, and being just, as we call it, life ready, I find that we still have a portion of our accountability system, and that some of it has to do with the bureaucracy of both federal and state accountability requirements. I find that it still proves to be a difficult thing for us to overcome, and particularly, as you will see when Dr. Flenard, who I think is going to do a really good job with it, I really have confidence in her, you're going to see how extremely confusing it can be. Tomorrow, the state will be releasing statewide pass rates for SOL tests. And as they did last year, they will send them out. It will look like they're low. Everyone will wonder why, and then we'll have to spend a lot of time explaining what these mean and what other types of pass rate measures mean. But the one thing that when the information comes out tomorrow, it is only piecemeal as it pertains to what is now looked at as a quality profile of an entire school and school system. And none of that other data will be ready until the end of September. So if you find yourself frustrated that you'd like to get the clear picture of exactly where we are, I join you in that, but one of the things that I appreciate Dr. Flenard and her team doing is putting together closer to that broad picture, even though we cannot tell you that these are 100% final results, but we feel very confident that they're at least very, very close. So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Flennard to share.
Thank you, and good evening. Good evening, Chairman Braswell, members of the board, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. As Dr. Baker indicated, we are going to present the accountability and achievement preliminary results, and I emphasize the word preliminary as the results will be coming out some tomorrow, and as Dr. Baker said, also on September 26th. So this is very preliminary. So our presentation this evening is an effort to provide an update to the board and the community regarding our current preliminary achievement data, as well as opportunities for and a focus on continuous growth. It is important that we really focus on our mission statement. You heard many times woven throughout this evening even that together we prepare our students for their future. When we think about, this is one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Pedro Niguero, the problem is not who we serve, but how they are served. And the board is well aware that we have a population that is changing, but James Comer said no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship first. And that is paramount to what we do in instruction and education today and tomorrow. So who are our students? It is important for the board to note that the data that you are seeing this evening for our student population is at the end of 1819. We do not have current data as today is our first day of school. So we are seeing some trend data that I can allude to, but it is very rough data as far as our current student population. You can see that our most significant changes are within the Hispanic population. There is also additional information regarding some of our other reporting categories, if the board is interested in having that information as well. Additionally, we have some of our demographics in regards to special education gifted L learners and enrolled in free and reduced lunch program. The board will recall that enrolled in free and reduced is a way of identifying economically disadvantaged, or ECD. The board's questions in the past have often centered around how many languages do our students currently speak. And to date, we have 65 languages that our students are speaking. If you actually looked at their home languages, that would be well over 100. As of May, we have received an additional 103 special education students as of the close of the school year last year, and we are still screening our L students at this time, so that information at this time is not quite available. This graphic is very familiar to our board. It's the framework for teaching and learning. This is how we operationalize our work. This is how we achieve our goal for the Virginia profile of a graduate, for our students to become career college, and as Dr. Baker said, life ready. This is, as Mr. Bradwell said, this is how we do it. So we're going to get right to some performance data. Ms. Gramp alluded to earlier that 100% of Spotsylvania County Public Schools is fully accredited for the second year in a row. However, the difference between this year and last year is last year our schools had an option of using the old system or the new system during that transition period. This year we are full on board with the new system. So even with the new system, we are 100% accredited, which is still excellent, excellent news. Accredited means that our schools have met the school quality indicators at either a level 1 or a level 2. Level 1 is considered green, yellow is level 2. A school that is accredited with conditions would be a school that has more than one of the quality indicators that is a level 3. What that would mean that they have a red indicator. And accreditation denied are schools that fail to adopt or fully implement the required corrective actions to address that level 3. A school rating of accreditation denied may regain state accreditation by demonstrating to the Board of Education that it is fully implementing all the corrective action plans. Once a school has reached full accreditation for 3 years, they have been given a waiver, meaning that they are automatically accredited for the next consecutive 3 years. Currently in Spotsylvania County, 28 out of your 29 schools are under that accreditation. The only school that is not is Post Oak Middle. However, they have 2 out of the 3, and we know that they are going to get it this year, so they will certainly be under the same waiver. This is a very exciting slide for us to share with the board as well as the community. For on-time graduation, I'm happy to report that, again, we have reached the highest on-time graduation that Spotsylvania County Public Schools has ever recognized, with a score of 93.16. Additionally, our dropout rate has gone down to 3.92, which is extremely exciting. There is much to celebrate in Spotsylvania County Public Schools. These next 2 slides, the board will recall that they do look familiar to you because this information was presented to you, I believe, in April by Mr. Keith Wolf when he was presenting the Career and Technical Development Plan that the board voted on. Just as a refresher, the benchmark or the target is the second column, and the final column is Spotsylvania County Public Schools' performance on that actual indicator. So you can see on this slide, we are well above all of the requirements. On the next slide also is career and technical education assessment data. Again, the second column is the target or the benchmark that's required, and the third column is our performance. And as Mr. Wolf indicated, the one area that we would like to see improvement in is our non-traditional completers. Advanced placement. In the area of advanced placement, you will notice that we do have, in 2019, there were less students that participated in AP courses. However, the number of students participating in the exam itself has increased. It has increased for a couple of reasons. One, we have increased courses such as environmental science, AP environmental science, to 9th graders. We also are looking to make sure that we're providing more equitable opportunities for our students and challenging students across the board in all of our reporting categories. When you are adding courses and you are accessing more students, then you also tend to see a decline in performance, which we have seen a slight decline in performance. I will tell you that the instruction department is already pulling apart this data vehemently and is working on a plan of action in order to address this slight dip. International Baccalaureate Program. These are the number of students that are enrolled in the IP diploma program. There were 5 IB seniors this past year. Out of the 5 seniors, 1 student graduated with an actual IB diploma. Another student missed the diploma by 1 point. Unfortunately, it was 1 point. The previous year, we had 13 students that were in the IB program. Of those 13, 3 had graduated with an IB diploma. So for a total of the past 2 years, we have had 18 students in the IB program as seniors, and out of those 18, 4 received an IB diploma. It's important to note that participating in the program itself does benefit our students greatly. There is an increase in fostering critical thinking, depth of knowledge, expanding students' global perspectives. The learning experiences foster inquiry, and they develop social and emotional characteristics that prepare our students for the college and the workplace. And students also complete an independent research and undertake a project that often involves community support and outreach. In a future board meeting, members of the instruction team will be presenting an update specifically on IB, AP, dual enrollment, and CGS in an effort to provide clarity to our community and to the board about the individual programs and their differences. Tomorrow, on August 13th, VDOE will release statewide division and state school pass rates. The data presented this evening, again, is preliminary, And it's important to note that the school division or schools will receive 3 different pass rates. Those 3 different pass rates are assessment or overall pass rate, accreditation, which is state accountability pass rates, as well as ESSA or the federal accountability pass rates. I'm going to demonstrate the 3 various pass rates using an elementary, middle, and a high school, and then later in the presentation I will also use the school division. You can see that there is a difference between all 3 different pass rates using this example from high school. I will review the reasons why there are 3 different pass rates and why they vary as the presentation goes on, but this is just an example for the board to see. The first column is the actual test or the indicator. The second column is the assessment or the pass rate. The third is the state accreditation pass rate. The fourth is the federal or ESSA pass rate for the various subject or content areas. Underneath the gray row or bar is the graduation requirements or the graduation success performance for the assessment, state, or federal pass rates. So you can see just from this example how it may be confusing for the community to say, how is my school performing and how do I know where they need to work and how they can work on that continuous improvement. Here's an example of a middle school. You'll notice that the middle school does not have graduation. You'll also note, for importance for the board to know, that at the middle school level, that is where most of our SOL tests are given, is to our middle school population, which is also a challenging time of life for our students at the middle school level. And finally is an elementary school. And again, you will see some fluctuation, almost 10% between one pass rate and another pass rate, still on the reading SOL. So we're going to talk about why that is in just a moment. It's important, and it's actually frames the conversation, is the graduation requirements. Above the blue line are our students that are currently in 11th and 12th grade, and they are the graduation requirements for 11th graders and 12th graders, above the blue line. Below the blue line is the graduation requirements for our 9th graders and current 10th graders. You will notice there is a difference between standard and advanced diplomas, between above the blue line and below the blue line. It is important to know what the definition of a verified credit is. A verified credit is 2-pronged. First, the student must pass the class, and second, they must pass the SOL. So you can see for our current 9th grade and 10th graders, both standard and advanced diplomas have 2 English credits, 1 math credit, 1 science, and 1 history, for a total of 5 verified credits. The difference now between a standard and advanced diploma for our 9th and 10th graders really is in the coursework itself, not the verified credits. So for example, a standard diploma, you would have 2 math courses, one of which must be verified. For an advanced diploma, a student must have 3 math courses, one of which must be verified. So, why does that impact SOL testing? Well, here is one example of why it impacts our SOL testing. Many school divisions across the state are seeing a decrease in some of their SOL scores. And this is an example using USVS history as a model. So in the past, in 2018, not this past school year, the one before, all students in USVA history were required to take the SOL test. An exception might be what I was referring to previously, as a student may have passed a course and not passed an SOL, or the other way around. So you would have potentially, for this example, 23 out of 25 students taking the USVA history exam. This past year, students are not permitted to take an SOL test unless it is needed for a verified credit. These students, in this example, have all passed their verified SOL history because they either took one in 9th grade or 10th grade, and they passed it. Therefore, they're not permitted to take the US VA history test. These students, you're going to be left with only 5 students left in the VA US history because you had other students who passed through using the other verified credit. With that example, your denominator just went down to 5. When that occurs, you now have one student that may not pass is 20% of that class. So that smaller denominator significantly impacts the results of an SOL test. So how does the state calculate that assessment pass rate? They calculate it, and this will help the board and the community understand why there are differences between the 3 scores. This score is calculated by using SOLs from grades 3 through 12 that are applicable. In this case, the reading tests, the writing tests, the science tests, the history, or the social studies tests. It's really almost raw data. The only students that are removed from this data are students that are in their first year of English language learning. So it's really most of our students. The interesting point about this data is that if we had a student enter our school division the week before the standards of learning tests from a different state, they would count for us. Regardless of where they've been educated or how they've been educated, they would count for our results. Our assessment pass rates are before you on the screen. I would like to point out that there are 3 asterisks on 2019 math, science, and history. The reason why I had put those asterisks there is because it would be ill-advised to use that as trend data. Just as the example that I used for the U.S. Virginia history, there are less students in these data sets as well. So for math, science, and history, you really are not looking at a trend point at this time for those specific content areas. It's also important to note and highlight that the math going up should be celebrated. We did have brand new math standards that were implemented this past year. And so our staff and students rose to the challenge and did find success in mathematics. It's not surprising that the largest decrease in score is in the U.S. history, is in our history because of the example that I provided earlier. And it is important, just for the board's knowledge, that the state did realize drops in reading as well, in writing, as well as history. However, there are things to celebrate when we think about our assessment data. 13 out of 17 elementaries increased their all assessment pass rates. That's to be celebrated. Post Oak Middle School is the only middle school to increase their English assessment pass rate. 3 middle schools increased their assessment pass rate for 3 of the 5 contents, writing, math, and science. They were Chancellor, Freedom, and Spotsylvania middle schools. Massaponax High School increased 3 out of their 5 content areas. 2 elementary schools increased their pass rate in all their content areas, R.A. Lee and Riverview Elementary. 5 elementary schools increased their all in 4 out of the 5, Battlefield, Cortland, Lee Hill Elementary, and obviously as well as Riverview and R.A. Lee. Now we will explore the second pass rate, which is called ESSA, or the Federal Accountability. This chart is not new to the board. On the left-hand column are the requirements for ESSA, or the federal government, and on the right-hand side is Virginia's response to those requirements. So ESSA, or the federal government, requires academic achievement, and Virginia uses the SOLs for reading and math. They require growth for elementary and middle schools. Virginia uses progress tables. ESSA requires graduation rates. ESSA requires us to use the FGI, or Federal Graduation Indicator. They also require progress for our L learners. We currently are using the access test. That is the requirement for our L children. And they have another school quality or student success, which we have, Virginia uses chronic absenteeism as that indicator. So how are ESSA pass rates calculated? They are calculated using our students in 3 through 5 SOL results. For reading, it is reading only. Writing is not included, and it is a cohort for high school. I'll talk more about a cohort in a moment. Also, ESSA uses math in grades 3 through 8, and also in a cohort opportunity for high school. And for science, it is science in grades 3 through 8, and biology only for high school. It is also almost raw data. The only students that are removed from this calculation are students that are not present with us for 50% of the school year. So conversely, our students that are first-year language students are in this data where they were not in the first data. The impact of the cohort rates. The cohorts, the potential concern for a cohort could be the fact that we may have a student move into our school division from another state or another county in which we would have to adopt their previous score that we may not have taught them. So for example, when you look at what a cohort is, the cohort, for example, in the area of math, typically a high school student may take Algebra 1. So Algebra 1 is the cohort and the test that is used to calculate math at the high school level. If you have a student that is advanced in mathematics and may have taken Algebra 1 and or geometry at the middle school level, then potentially it could be geometry or Algebra 2 that is used as a cohort. So if you have a student that transitioned into our school system taking one of those courses in a previous district, we would automatically inherit that student's score from another district. So that could be a potential concern. Our preliminary ESSA data as a school division is as follows, and it is on the screen. On the first column is our indicator according to ESSA. The second column is the benchmark or the target in which we need to achieve. The third column is last year's data, and the final column is our current data. Again, you will notice that there are asterisks next to the math and the science because that, again, is cohort data for high school, and it is not that way in 2018. So it is not advisable to look at that as a trend in those two content areas. It is important to note that we have met all of our ESSA requirements, so that should be celebrated as well. Some of our achievements: 7 out of 17 elementary schools met all the math and reading AMOs, or annual measurable objectives, for all reporting categories, which is very impressive. They are Battlefield, Cortland, Chancellor, Salem, Smith Station, Courthouse Road, and Parkside Elementary Schools. 13 out of 17 elementary schools met the math AMO for the all reporting category. 14 out of 17 elementary schools met the reading for the all category, and 14 out of 17 also met the math. Spotsylvania Middle School and Nye River Middle School met the math AMOs for all reporting categories. 6 out of 7 middle schools met the AMO for all. 4 out of 5 met the FGI, or Federal Graduation Indicator, AMO for all. It is important for the board to remember that the FGI is the graduation indicator that does not acknowledge our students with disabilities diploma. So it is only a standard or advanced diploma for FGI. And all high schools met the reading and math AMO for all. Virginia must have a response, according to ESSA, according to the federal government, for schools that are not meeting the federal accountability. And that program is called Comprehensive and Targeted Schools. The board may recall it's a similar program to when schools were considered focus or priority. The row called Comprehensive Support and Improvement is really based on the all performance. And those are schools that are the lowest 5% of the state in Title I. Any high school with a FGI, or Federal Graduation Indicator, of below 67, and schools identified every 3 years, and that began this past year. The row that's called Targeted Support and Improvement is based on the performance category of all of the reporting categories, all the individual reporting categories. It is for title and non-title schools with low-performing student reported categories, and that is beginning with this school year. So I'm happy to say that the zeros on this screen are good news. So Virginia, on to the third data set. The state of Virginia, the final pass rate is what a school receives, is called the Virginia Standards of Accreditation. The state no longer provides an overall division pass rate for the Standards of Accreditation. Additionally, Virginia is now using the reporting category systems that it did not previously. So how do they calculate the Virginia accreditation? Again, it's for SOL tests in grade 3 through 12. In this calculation, reading and writing is combined to be one score. Math are all tests and science are all tests. It allows for growth for SOLs for students in grades 3 through 8, reading and math only, and that is because it has to be the same content. So as an example, a 7th grader that did not pass the reading test and then takes that test in 8th grade, if they had a large amount of growth, even though they may not have passed, it could count for a student as growth. You cannot do that when you start to get to the high school level, when you're talking about Algebra 1 to geometry. Those are two different contents. So growth is really for our elementary and middle schools. Our L students can use progress on their access test. After the 20th day of instruction, our students can be removed. The L students that have not been in the state of Virginia for 11 semesters could also be removed. And substitute tests are permitted, such as the work keys tests, for reading at the high school level if they did not pass the SOL reading test first. They do have to attempt the SOL reading test first. Again, you will look at the, this is Spotsylvania County Schools Virginia accreditation. I will heed the board's warning on the fact that these are hand calculated because it is not given to us as a division anymore. So the team has hand calculated that so that we can see how we are doing in regards to our performance. Again, you'll see asterisks next to math and science because of the lack of trend data for those two content areas. Again, our English scores are reflective of reading and writing combined, which is the writing test is an 8th grade test and as well as an 11th grade test. Overall, we are seeing a slight decline in reading and science with an increase in math on these data sets. It's important to note that in this regard. Again, this is the reporting categories in the area of English that were hand calculated. English is something that you can look at from one year to the next. It is something that that we are very focused on as a school division. We acknowledge that, similar to other counties, we have progress to make in our areas of reporting categories, particularly with our students with disabilities decline and trying to make sure that we are looking at closing achievement gaps in all of our reporting categories. Math, I did put this up for the board, but math is one of those contents that it would not behoove us to look at a trend data. But you can see we have realized some gains really in every single reporting category across the board, other than English learners is flat, is even, but it is 91, which is very nice. It is important for us to acknowledge there has been some growth in our students with disabilities, as well as the reporting category of Black. And there is still work to be done to close the achievement gaps in our reporting categories of the area of mathematics. So some of our highlights on this assessment rate is all of our elementary schools met the all benchmark for English and math. 5 middle schools met the all accreditation benchmark for English and math. All 5 high schools met the all benchmark in English and math. 2 more schools earned their 3-year accreditation. That's Chancellor Middle and Riverview Elementary. Additionally, 28 out of the 29 years of schools have earned their 3-year waiver. I referenced that earlier, that Post Oak is on year 2 of 3, so we know that they're on their way and they'll get it this year. So that's exciting. 16 out of 17 elementary schools increased their math pass rate. All 7 increased their math pass rate at the middle school level, and 3 out of 5 high schools increased their pass rate in math. These are the other school quality indicators that Virginia has. The first column is the indicator itself. The second column is the state benchmark or the target that we're required to meet. And then the third column is last year's. The fourth column is our current year. And you will notice that we had an increase in graduation and completion index. Our chronic absenteeism is the same. There's that great dropout rate, again, that went down, which is wonderful news. And we had a slight decrease in the College and Career Civics Readiness Index, although it's not really being reported until 2022. So this is a comparison similar to the schools that I had put up earlier, where we had example of a high, a middle, and an elementary school with the 3 different pass rates. This is Spotsylvania's. Collectively, all 3 pass rates. The first column indicates the indicator or the content. The second column is the assessment pass rate. The third is the state accreditation, which is based on that hand calculation. And the last is the ESSA. And you can see, similar to the schools, you will see variance for the school division as well. And that is based on how those rates are actually calculated. Below the gray bar, you will see there are 3 different manners in which graduation is also calculated. Virginia on-time graduation, that has previously been reported to you this evening as a 93.16, which is very exciting. The state graduation completion, that is actually based on a point system, 93.3 is our current points. In order to meet the benchmark, you must be at least 88 points. So we're well above the 88. And FGI indicator is an 88. For FGI, the target is an 84. So we are above the federal requirements as well. Many times the board will ask if we have any data about post-secondary plans for our students. This chart does represent, and I'll let the board digest and the community digest this chart for a moment. It indicates what the plans are for our recent graduates, whether they're moving on to a 4-year, 2-year military or other school or work opportunity. It is interesting data for the community to be able to see. So I presented a significant amount of data this evening that we, as a division, as school level leaders, as teachers and educators, need to process and utilize so that we can make efforts towards continuous improvement. And so we must ask ourselves, where do we go from here? Well, we do have some focus areas based on some of the data that has been presented this evening. We do have some academic performance, specifically in K-12, the area of reading and writing. VDOE, just to let the board know, is actually looking quite closely at the marked decrease in the writing scores that's actually statewide. There is now 2 years of data for those students in 8th grade who did not take a 5th grade writing test, and so they are looking at the impact of that. Additionally, overall, we are doing well with graduation, but there's still areas in some of the reporting categories that we could do better, L graduation as well as special education. And even though we have made federal and state targets in the area of chronic absenteeism, it is something we've not really moved the needle on. So we would like to focus and continue our efforts in chronic absenteeism and improving our student attendance. So how do we do that? It actually brings us full circle back to the framework for teaching and learning. We have a very robust school improvement process that analyzes data in depth, which really does guide and help us with our professional learning. And thanks to the board, you have supported additional professional learning days and opportunities that are built in our instructional calendar. And that is an effort to address some of the areas of need that we have. We also have a variety of opportunities that are built into our processes that are listed there to build leadership capacity at the teacher, the school, as well as the division level. And I know that I shared quite a bit of information this evening, and if there's any questions, I would be happy to address them. But first, I would like to thank the board themselves, Dr. Baker, our teachers, our parents, our administrators, and all of our support staff for their hard work. Our students are truly lucky to have amazing and dedicated group of individuals here in Spotsylvania County Public Schools, and I thank you all for your efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Flenard, for your briefing. I want to turn it over to my colleagues. Do we have any questions for Dr. Flenard? Okay, let's start with Ms. Phelps, and then we'll go with Ms. Shelley.
Thank you for presenting that, Carol. Dr. Flenard, sorry. I do have a question. The data that you just showed us is our Spotsylvania data, which should coincide, keep our fingers crossed, with tomorrow's data coming out from the state. Am I correct?
The data that will be presented tomorrow, if I can pull that back up, is called the assessment or pass rate, and that would be this slide here. So that tomorrow on August 13th, this is the data that will be presented. The other two, the federal as well as Virginia, is later in September.
Okay, and the IB, those scores are out, right? With the one graduate and the IB, with the IB diploma?
Yes, however, those would not necessarily be on a school report card or a division report card. That is internal data that we certainly look at in regards to making sure that we are looking at our performance and how we can better meet the new needs of our students, but it is not an indicator on assessment, federal, or Virginia pass rates.
Thank you. I really like that slide with the little kids and the SOL. Anyway, okay, thanks.
Ms. Shelley.
I just have a comment, and I just want to congratulate our division on the math. I know it's not trend data, but I've been doing this for a really long time, and I mean not on the board, I mean teaching. And I know that when standards change, scores usually go down.
They do.
And our scores went up. So I think that is just amazing, and that just puts forth more that our coaches, our teachers, our administrators, everyone involved in math. But I know it's math across the curriculum because they're doing it in their other classes as well. So that would include everybody, and I just want to congratulate the division for the growth in math.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. We'll go with Mr. Blayne and then Ms. Graham.
You're right, that's a lot of information. I get tired of kind of hearing and trying to assemble it, frankly. But I think it shows the progress that our division has made and continues to make, and I'm very proud to be associated with the teachers that accomplish this. So that's a compliment to everyone there. An area that I'm curious about is the CTE area. And all the materials that we were just looking at are certainly appropriate to students in those areas as well. But are there any plans to evaluate that area of learning and instruction in terms of needs that we have and the accomplishments of those children, of those young people in their careers?
Certainly. It actually goes across several areas, and I'm sure Mr. Wolf is probably chomping at the bit to step forward as well, but I'll take a stab at it and see if he would like to add any additional information. One of that is the indicator that is part of the 2022 evaluation system, which is that College and Career Index that I referenced earlier. Additionally, under Mr. Wolf's leadership, he actually asked for a full audit of career and technical education last year, even though we were not required to by the state. And that was in an effort to really analyze and look at how we are doing in the world of career and technical education and where we can find areas to improve. So I commend him for asking for that educational audit. And I can tell you that additionally, one of the areas that he eagerly looks at is what are the availability of the job markets locally and globally, and how does our course studies align to that market, and are we adjusting either to add or subtract according to what the needs of our students really are and how we can make them college, career, and life ready. Mr. Wolf? Oh, I got 2 thumbs up.
Thank you.
Ms. Graham.
This makes me happy. I just want to clear some things up since we're on a factual basis this morning. Ms. Shelley and I last year received a recording of a school board member saying in a public meeting setting that we fudged our numbers and we were not truly accredited, and that the whole process was flawed and we were not achieving good standards. I would not want to think that anyone up here is not looking out for the best for our students, and grateful of all the hard work and effort that our staff puts in. So I was hoping that from the recording, maybe they were talking about numbers as far as being different. Maybe they didn't understand the 3 score systems. Mm-hmm. And if you don't really understand it, or if you haven't done the research into it, it can look like there's different numbers and we changed them from one to another, but there's 3 different standards, 3 different reports, 3 different things, and nothing's changed. Now, of course, we said earlier these were our numbers and the other numbers are going to come out. From year to year, is there a big variance from our projections to the ones that actually come out? And do they change?
I have not had a time where our predictions have changed as far as when I stand before the board and present preliminary data. I have not had an opportunity in which that data has changed, and I was surprised on August 13th or September 26th. That doesn't mean that they certainly
that we could be
are
wrong
in stone, and that I get notified tomorrow morning that one of the reports, but they do send us the preliminary reports early. We do have an opportunity to review them and to look at them. I can tell you that I often, as Dr. Baker will know, that I often question and challenge and ask for clarification on certain things because something may not have settled the way that I anticipated it being settled in May. But I have not had an opportunity in which a preliminary, they do refresh preliminary, but if this makes sense, a final preliminary right before they come out the day before, I have not had that. I have had preliminary change, like the first preliminary come out, then the second is different than the first, and that's when I really start to question some of the data and how they arrived at that. But when you really start to refresh that preliminary data, I have not had an opportunity in which it's changed.
But the data is not manipulated by the administration, and we are truly state accredited for 2 years in a row, and that's not with us fudging the numbers.
No, ma'am, we have had 100% of our schools accredited by the state of Virginia for 2 consecutive years.
Correct. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any others? Dr. Baker, please.
I just wanted to comment, and it really goes with the first comments that I made. I think the good news is that the state has really made a concerted effort to focus away from this obsessive standardized testing era that we've been in, and try to move to more localized assessments that are really, aligned with what we want students to be able to show and do at the end of their learning, at the end of their work. But what I think is going to be continually confusing for the public, and that's why Dr. Flenard is trying to provide all of this detail, is it's, sometimes it's as clear as mud, and I think that it's important that folks understand that when we're looking at performance of our students now, the way the state has shifted is we're not just looking at pass-fail, which is why and I'm not alone, am disappointed that we continue as a state, and they may be a reason that they have to, but we put out a set of isolated raw pass rates, and we give an impression to folks, yet the state has moved towards saying that student growth from one year to the next is just as important as whether you pass the test the first time or the only time that you take it. And especially for some of our students with special needs, our students who are, they've made tremendous progress from one year to the next. And our staff and our teachers and our students should feel gratified by that. They should feel encouraged by that. So I am very pleased that we're moving to that, but yet we still, I think, the way that we not only disaggregate the data, but the way we put it out in two separate packages and literally about a month and a half apart, that is something that I hope we get away from. I also think that the board, even though the state will continue as well as the federal government, they will put these trends out that will show 3 years or 2 years. As you will probably hear in the statement that will come out from the state tomorrow, that there is a new baseline or a new trend beginning this year in certain areas. And even though I appreciate Ms. Shelley's compliment, I'm very pleased with what I saw, particularly with how our students not only passed math, but grew in math, which was even more impressive than the pass rates. Because what you will find is that our declines and our increases are fairly consistent with what you're going to see statewide. Math went up as is in the state. Reading went down slightly. The other two areas may have stayed the same or gone down, and that is, again, due to we can't even compare our respective divisions, because why would you want to say, it's not good that we have fewer students that need an 11th grade verified credit, because what we're saying is they have achieved to the point where they don't need that.
Right.
And so when we look at that test score and then say, but why did you go down? I hope that it came across that we have to begin to look at this data differently. So again, just to kind of piggyback on some things that were shared.
Thank you. I don't want to replicate things that my colleagues have already said. I just want to say that the numbers speak for themselves. And I want to say to Dr. Baker, when things go not so well, you are responsible. And when things go well, you get the credit. That's leadership. That's how it works. And so I salute you for these great numbers. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Flenard. And we'll move on to...
I wanted to ask her one question.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Sorry. Can I ask you, so last year, how the numbers, Spotsylvania came out with their own numbers, kind of this table and slides that you showed us, but the state, we had that leeway year because they were changing over to the standards for this year. Am I right? And that's where the green, yellow, and red came in. Can you explain that? Because that was what I was trying to allude to, the fact from last year's data and stats from the state when they came out, but we had a bye year or a leeway year of interpreting our own numbers because they were switching over to the new standardized, the new data, I guess, releasing their new process of accumulating data. Does that make sense?
Just to clarify, I think I understand, and if I don't, please let me know if I'm not explaining or getting at the response that you're hoping to achieve this evening. Last year, schools could meet the accreditation standards one of two ways, and that was with the new system, which is the red, yellow, green, or it could be the previous, which was the all 75-70. In 75 was the English, and then 70 for the other science, math, and social studies. It did not change the actual results. We still had 3 ways of calculating, and so those calculations are different formulas. So it did not necessarily change the results in any way. It did allow a school to say, I made it based on the new red, yellow, green, or I made it on the previous system, which was the 75 for English and 70. So the results themselves were what they were, the numbers. The only variance that occurred would be the way that the 3 pass rates were calculated. So the numbers didn't change, just the manner in whichever the school benefited from, they were permitted to use. That has gone away. Now everyone must use the level 1, level 2, level 3, the green, yellow, red. The 75 and 70 straight out is no longer part of Virginia.
Okay, so then right across, it's the red, yellow, and green.
That's
okay,
correct.
perfect. Thank you for explaining that to the public. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move on to 15.01. Second reading approval of revisions to school board policy 5-year cyclical review, round 2. At the July 8th, 2019 regular meeting, the board granted first reading approval for the update of 53 policies and regulations that were considered pursuant to a routine 5-year cyclical policy review. These policies are presented this evening. That the school board, administration's recommendations that the school board approves the proposed action for each of the policies and regulations as outlined on the 2019 cyclical review, round 2 policy index manual, and policy review checklist as presented. Chair will now entertain a motion.
I move
Mr.
that
Chair.
we approve as requested.
We have a motion by Dr. Meyer. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Seconded by Mr. Blayne. Any discussion? Ms. Phelps?
I just had a couple questions. One thing I did like about that was the attendance forms looks more student and parent friendly, and also the policy IKB seems like students will not be receiving homework with this policy. I guess it would be an option for teachers. But one thing I did want to ask, and I don't know who to ask, whether it's legal or whatnot, was the internet policy. Did we receive legal advice on it? Does anybody know?
Internet policy.
Is it legal?
I just had a question given to me if it infringed on the individual's privacy. So that was just a question I put out there. I wanted to see if anybody
Which,
could answer it.
Miss,
It's the internet policy on the, it's the internet policy on the reviews. It's, yes. So I didn't know. It was just a question that was asked to me, so I figured I would bring it up.
which policy is it? Which policy ID number is it?
It's the internet policy. I don't have it.
We believe it's IBF.
IBF, yeah.
IDF?
IIBF.
internet safety, Ms. Phelps?
Yeah, the internet safety policy, yes, sorry.
I don't,
Mr. Braswell, may I ask a question?
And just for staff
Miss-
Go ahead.
that might be wanting to respond, what was the specific question about it? One more time.
The specific question was asked to me, did we have written legal advice, and could this policy infringe on individuals' privacy? So that's why I'm bringing it up. It was asked of me, so I figured I went through the policy checklist over again after our last meeting that we read it. So I wanted to just bring it up just so the public can.
It would be considered in the context of HIPAA and FERPA, that staff would have reviewed that. But if you're asking if there was a specific legal review of it, Ms.
Isn't the
This is a-
VSBA,
It's a
VSBA's?
VSBA policy, so
Yeah.
it was vetted
No,
through.
this is actually a blended policy, would be VSBA and,
And Spotsy.
Correct, but the additions that are Spotsylvania are really considered very minor. The heart of that policy is VSBA language.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. We'll move to 15.02. Take me a second here.
Good evening, Mr. Braswell, members
Good.
of the board, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. At the request of the school board during its last regular meeting on July 8th, 2019, Regulation JHCFR1, School Wellness, has been revised to include language regarding weather guidelines for outdoor recess and is provided for review. The following language was added. General temperature guidelines for outdoor recess are as follows: not below 35 degrees, nor above 90 degrees, or a heat index of 105. Administration recommends the school board approves the amendment to Regulation JHCF as written.
I would like to make a motion to approve the revision to JHCFR1.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. We have a motion by Ms. Shelley, and we have a second by Ms. Gramp. Any discussion? Ms. Shelley first.
I would like to say thank you. That was something that I brought up at our last meeting, so I truly appreciate that staff looked at that, and they looked at it, we have it now, because we've had it in our handbooks, but now it's in policy or regulation, so I appreciate that. It's just more safety for our students.
Ms. Phelps.
So just to be clear, have we had any cold weather incidents?
None to my recollection, no.
Okay. So we haven't had any cold weather incidents. Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is, and it's just my opinion and what I believe, is that the division never had an incident involving cold weather with the students, because I believe that the teachers and the staff and the administration use common sense and know when it's too cold outside. However, we had hot weather incidences, right? This time last year, or sometime in August last year, where buses were 100 degrees, and we had to provide them water, and they don't have air conditioning. So I'm sitting here, now we're creating what I believe is a unnecessary policy right now for mittens or for cold weather, and because it's politics and election season. So, and that's just my opinion, and I believe that that's what's driving this right now, whereas I think as a board, we should be talking about the hot weather, the no air conditioning on the buses, and how we're going to approach that and have a policy in place for kids not to be on buses when it's over 90 degrees. So I'm just going to abstain from this. Thank you.
Well, I believe, Ms. Phelps, I believe that the board had requested that staff operationalize what their current practices are. And so I'm sure that what was done was a consensus of all of the elementary school teachers to determine when they brought students out when the weather was cold, and when they did so when the weather was hot. There is also a significant difference between a heat index when you're outside as opposed to a heat index when you're inside a vehicle. And so I don't, the emphasis was on recess and when we let children out. So that being said, is there any other questions? Any other questions? Dr. Baker?
I just want to re-clarify, we did bring the, I think it was brought up last year that we had statements in our parent-student handbook that I believe we took the direction from the board to now convert that into a regulation so that we had consistency. It was not done out of a kind of a recent opinion or something that staff, we thought that was what the board wanted us to do.
That's right, yeah. So we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Is there an abstention?
Phelps, aye.
Okay, so Ms. Phelps is abstaining, not voting aye. You're abstaining, not voting aye, right?
That's what I said.
Okay. Well, thank you, ma'am. Okay, so the motion carries 6-0-1. We'll move on to 15.03. Ms. Carter and Dr. Colbert.
Good evening, Chairman Braswell, school board members, excuse me, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. This evening I'll be presenting two contract award items. The first item is a contract recommendation for short and long-term disability benefits for both legacy and hybrid employees. The procurement department issued a request for proposal on April 12th, 2019 from highly qualified offerers of employer-sponsored short-term and long-term disability plans for both hybrid and legacy employee groups. The 2012 General Assembly created the Virginia Local Disability Program for political subdivisions and school division employees who are hired or rehired on or after January 1st, 2014 without VRS credit and who will be covered under the newly created VRS Hybrid Retirement Plan. Proposals were due May 9th, 2019 by 2:00 p.m., and the request for proposal was initiated by the Procurement Department with consulting assistance from Mark III Employee Benefits. 3 proposals were received by the due date and time, and after initial evaluations were submitted, phone interviews were conducted with the top 2 ranking firms, and following those interviews, the evaluation committee determined the most qualified firm to be the Standard Insurance Company based on total cumulative scoring. So it is staff's recommendation that the school board authorize staff to enter into contract with the Standard Insurance Company to provide the services mentioned. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Let's call for a motion first. We have a motion on the floor. Moved by Dr. Myers, or second. Second by Ms. Gramp. So properly moved and seconded. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to 15.04, award of contract IFB 072-52019-1400 for the LED lighting replacement project. Ms. Carter and Mr. Hockaday.
Thank you. And I will tell you, you may want to refresh your page because the amount actually changed to the 2 schools that we will be actually asking for award instead of the total amount of the bid, but I'll go through that in a second. The project consisting of replacing existing lighting and switches in Berkeley Elementary School, Livingston Elementary School, Riverview Elementary School, Thornburg Middle School, and Spotsylvania High School. Consisted of LED lighting, low voltage controls, power packs, occupancy sensors, and daylight harvesting sensors, reusing power wiring, conduits, and boxes whenever possible. The work includes light fixture removal, removal of controls, various miscellaneous work, electrical work, and device programming. The procurement was advertised on EVA, the Virginia statewide electronic procurement website, and posted on Spotsylvania County Public Schools purchasing website. 4 bids were received. 3 of those bids conformed to all specifications defined in the invitation for bid, and 1 was rejected. On behalf of staff, we are recommending that the school board accept the low bid from Hazard Electrical for Berkeley Elementary School and Spotsylvania High School, which will be completed for a total of $2,298,500, which falls in line with the original Capital Improvement Fund budget. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. We'll have a motion on the floor.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Myers, our second. Second by Mr. Blayne, so properly moved and seconded. Any questions for Ms. Carter? Ms. Phelps?
Can you tell me what the cost benefit of installing the LED lighting? Right now, I remember I was at the meeting probably about 3 years back when this got brought up, and if I believe right, it was, we're not going to see the savings for 6 years for the LED?
Well, no, ma'am. Actually, you see the savings as soon as it's installed, but the payoff is about 6 years. So once the 6-year time frame is up, the project has paid for itself, and then whatever your savings is 100% savings. So if that makes sense, the savings is there up as soon as you start using the LED because you don't have the usage.
Did you send out, I didn't receive any backup documentation, just the scoring card. Do you have any, like, backup documentation, LED versus?
On LED lighting?
Yeah.
I do not have it with me. I can provide LED some information. We had provided some of that information in the past. I can tell you that we have received 3 increases in our electricity over the last 5 years, and our operating budget for electrical has not gone up because we have done these upgrades. If we did not, then we would have had to have added to our operating budget. We did a project in-house of our own just by changing the parking lot lights out at Spotsylvania High School from standard to the LED lights. That work was about $26,000. That work paid for itself within a year. So it's a $26,000 savings in 1 year. We paid for the work, and now that's a $26,000 a year savings that we're getting. So that's just some data that I know that we've gotten within our in-house that is not national averages. It's real data that we've collected.
So I didn't know that before tonight, so I'm kind of having a hard time with the requests now. I mean, right now I'm just finding out $2.9 million price tag. It just with what we've gone through, isn't that we just said 2.9? We changed it from 4.6? Is that what we're changing it to?
That total is for all of the bids that was given. We're not doing all of them because we need to stay within the amounts that we had in our CIP. So this is actually a little less than what the amount is in our CIP for the upcoming year for projects, for the LED projects. And that's why we recommend doing these 2. And they are also the 2 that I think we will gain the most savings from, mostly because those schools are T12 lights. One of the things about LED lighting is the federal government, EPA, there are no T12 lights made in the United States any longer. So there has to be a change to something. We could go to T5s, which is a newer style fluorescent, but the reality is that they're probably going to do away with T5s. So then you get into a situation where you've converted to a T5 fixture or in bulb. You're not gaining the savings you would on electricity, and then you have to replace them again. Or you can go to another type fixture, another bulb altogether, which is LED, which is the prominent trade-off out there now. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have made the recommendation just because there wasn't enough data. Now there is. The lights that you're sitting under are LED lighting. There's a lot of data out there we presented before that not only is it the savings for the usage is down, but to me, the even bigger and most exciting change is there's a lot of data out there that supports it. Those students that are special needs, it's better for them. It's also, they've seen instances where you have less referrals to the office. It's a whole gamut of things in these studies. So I think that's even more exciting than what we're saving.
Right, so I'm just having a really difficult time since I don't have any backup documents except for the scoring card to make a informed vote and informed decision. You know, the state of our community right now with anything that has to do with CIP funds, you know, I'm receiving questionable questions towards me. So, and in order to build that trust as a community right now, I want the community to know that what they feel and what they say does matter. And I just don't have any factual backup documentation right now what to prove to me one way or another that spending $2.9 million of our hard-earned tax dollars would be beneficial right now, because I don't have backup documentation, factual information that I could read. You know, I received the scoring card with a $4.6 million request, and at the last minute it's 2.9. So I'm trying to figure everything out and have all these questions answered. And you know, I would have questions about solar panels. Would solar panels help us with the electrical bill? You know, it would be questions that I would ask if I had backup documentation. And I think just with the climate right now that our county is in, spending this exorbitant amount of money, I just don't feel it's right now, today, that I can support this. But I appreciate it, and if you send me some backup documentation, even though it will probably pass, I would like to have more knowledge on it. Thank you.
And I'd be glad to provide you with any information we've gained and get that to you in the proper channels.
Thank you. Let's go with Mr. Twig, and then we'll go with Ms. Graham.
Excuse me, name the two schools once more, please.
Berkeley Elementary and Spotsylvania High School.
Thank you. And aren't we up against a federal mandate deadline that we're long past? Can you explain that a little bit, please?
Yes, sir. The federal, it's actually been 5 years now since that was passed. Currently there are no T12 bulbs made in the United States. What is out there are either old stock that we are purchasing, or they are being transported in from Mexico. So if the longer we buy T12 fixtures or T12 bulbs, it's good for I guess it's good for their economy, not ours. So yes, because of the EPA guidelines, we can no longer can no longer be manufactured. Therefore, the cost of buying those bulbs is extravagant right now, and that's one of the things driving factors of replacing them. And at this time, in my opinion, and I don't have anything to show it in front of you, but my opinion is that this is the best option.
Check. And then didn't we start this about 2 summers ago? So
actually,
this isn't new.
The first ones we put in is about 5 years ago. We did some test data to make sure they were what they said they were.
Okay, fine.
And then we did several schools over the last 2 years.
And then about 2 years ago, we got serious about it, and CIP and mandate.
Yes, sir.
Running
the last
against
2
the
years
mandate.
has been
Yes,
when
okay.
we've done them.
Right.
Ones we have
yeah,
done.
I can support that. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Twig. Ms. Graham.
Mr. Twig pointed out my points, that they don't even make the fixtures anymore, so there has to be a change. So it's just which we were going to go with. So the more efficient one, which you could just Google and see the more efficient. But since we're already seeing savings, that's wonderful to hear.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Phelps, no.
And we have one no, so the motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
15.05, 2019 VSBA Media Honor Roll nomination, Ms. Daniels.
Good evening, Chair, board members, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the VSBA Media Honor Roll. So reporters and local media outlets play an important role in public education. School division leaders rely on responsible reporting by local media representatives so that our community members receive timely information about division initiatives and programs. Considering the impact that media coverage can have on community attitudes and beliefs, the Virginia School Boards Association Media Honor Roll was created to recognize fair and balanced reporting about our schools and Virginia's public education system. It is our recommendation this evening that the school board adopt the attached resolution, and if you should have it attached, but I can read it if you'd like, nominating the following media member for this past year's reporting and support to engage our community with school initiatives and information. And that reporter is Adele Uphouse with the Freelance Star newspaper. This time I'll answer any questions you might have.
We'll call for a motion first.
To make the motion to honor Adele Uphouse as our media honor roll.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley, and we have a second by Dr. Meyer. Any discussion? Please.
Okay, so I've never met Adele, but I have read what she has written in the Freelance Star, and even though it is a newspaper, I think that she sheds light on topics that need to, and she's fair, and she's balanced. And I know a lot of my peers here might not agree with newspaper and some of the reporters, but I think that she's fair, and she's and she deserves it. So even though I never met you, Adele, yes, congratulations.
Is there any other comments? Any other comments? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. 16.01, is there any unfinished business?
You had some items.
Should we call that unfinished? Had that under new business, so we'll call that unfinished business, okay? So we'll start with 9.01 in the consent agenda, which was, let me get my, approval of the minutes. So we have we need to have a motion on the floor for approval of the minutes. We have a motion, then we'll discuss. We have a motion on the floor for approval. Motion. Moved by Mr. Twigg. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Meyer. Now we'll turn to Ms. Phelps for any questions that she had.
So my question was for the in the meeting minutes, our meetings are recorded online. However, sometimes when you go online, you can't bring the meeting up, and going down the pike as far as being archived meetings, it's hard to.
Excuse me, he couldn't hear. Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Phelps.
Sorry, technical difficulties. You got it? We're good? Okay. And as I was going over, reviewing the meeting minutes from the July 8th meeting, I noticed that there were no comments from the board members within the minutes. So I just wanted to bring that up to the board in order to have our meetings reflect the school board member comments and discussions added to those meeting minutes, and that was pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Phelps. We're going to go with Ms. Shelley and then Ms. Graham.
I don't know what you were looking at, Ms. Phelps, because I'm looking right now at the July 8th, 2019 minutes. I'm going down to 13.02, board member comments. There is comments from Dr. Meyer. There's comments from Mr. Blayne. There's comments from you, Ms. Graham, and myself. in the minutes. So
Okay, let me go.
say there were no, I'm just confused
I'm
with what
sorry.
your statement.
Sorry, let me go back. At the beginning of the meeting, when we had, I think it was Sean Hockaday and Mr. Upperco come up and speak to us, we had had a questions back and forth, and they answered them, and we had a discussion, and they're not included in the minutes. It's not, I'm sorry, I apologize for, it wasn't the board member comments, it was within the discussions of each
Discussion of action
item.
items. Okay.
Thank you for
So,
that
Ms. Graham, go ahead, please.
We've been through this as a board in prior year on 2 occasions, but if you read through Robert's Rules minutes, the state code minutes, everything in the minutes, they're supposed to give the main points of discussions. They're not supposed to be word for word by any means account of meetings. That's why there are video recordings. That's why Mr. Twigg motioned to have our work sessions recorded so that there was an account like that. And since that already exists, I do not think our minutes need to change from the function of how minutes are supposed to be. They're supposed to be the main points, decisions made by the participants, record what is the most important points, and record future decisions. Nothing says it should be a word-for-word account of a meeting.
And my understanding of that is the same, and when Mr. Twigg, I want to say a couple years ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Twigg, you were concerned about that, and we rectified that issue by making sure that that those meetings were videotaped live when it was feasible. So with that being said, we'll call for the vote. Okay, please, go ahead.
So the reason why I brought the discussion up is because since I've taken this seat, the minutes that I've reviewed before our board meetings were in depth and detailed. So I guess maybe, I guess that would be my human error to just assume that it would be the same every meeting. So with that, I'm just putting that out there, because there were some important comments and discussions that we had and that weren't in the minutes. However, if the majority of the board wants to just go with the recording, and I'm totally on board with recording our minutes, I totally agree with that. But that's why I was just maybe, it's new to me that the discussions back and forth weren't there. It's not for any lack of anything else. That's the reason why I brought it up.
Yes, ma'am. We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. We'll go to 9.04 now. Approval of Cortland High School renovation project change orders 15, 16, 17, and 18. I see Mr. Upperco coming forward with Mr. Hockaday and also with Mr. Davis. So go ahead. Well, let's go ahead and give us a presentation first, and then we'll call for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Baker, Dr. Martin, members of the board. In construction project management, changes in the scope of work that are agreed to by the owner, which is us, the school division, contractor, and architect are called change orders. The school division's change order committee, comprised of 2 school board members, which are Dr. Meyer and Mr. Twigg, the acting clerk of the works, which in this case would be Mr. Davis, the executive director of operations, myself, and the architect, met on July 31, 2019, to review change orders pertaining to the Cortland High School renovation with a total cost of $70,437. Now, would you like me to go through each of the items, or?
No, we're going to go ahead and get a motion first, so can we have a motion? Motion approved by Dr. Myers, second by Mr. Blayne.
I have a discussion question real quick.
Okay, go ahead, please.
For this to come to us, that means it's been through the change order committee, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. But it was pulled from the consent agenda, so we'll go ahead and address it. Go ahead, please. Is there any other questions for Mr. Upperco?
Well, I think it has to do with allowing me to ask questions instead of just saying yes to consenting to it. I
Okay.
had some questions to ask.
Okay, well,
That's
go ahead.
it. It wasn't that it was approved with your committee or not. It was just some questions
Well, go
that
ahead
I
and ask
wanted
your
to
question,
ask.
ma'am.
Okay. So, with that being said, I did have a question. Was the total amount of funds, what is the total amount of funds that are left in the maintenance facilities fund for, set aside for the Cortland project? Do you know?
I know that we still have retainage left, which is what these change orders come from. The retainage included in the contract, which is in essence holdback. I don't have a specific figure I can give you at this point in terms of, I think, what you're asking me. But these changes, when they involve additional monies, come from retainage in the contract.
So it's a cushion, pretty much.
I don't want to say
Cushion.
contingency, but it's similar to
Right.
holdback that you have in
For cost
anything of
overruns.
this scope. You're going to have, as you go along, a necessity to change as you find things that need to be improved, or sometimes you get a credit as well, depending if you can do things in a different way that might save monies as well, so.
So was the field house included in the approval of the Cortland renovation project?
The field house was
Just the field house?
in your, I believe, May meeting. That was the last time that we brought forth a change order committee recommendation to the board, and it was approved at that time. And I believe that was a consent agenda item at that time. But it was
Okay.
approved, yes.
Right, so that's where the consent, that's why I asked for it to be pulled, so I could just ask these questions. So I would have asked these questions if I was still on the change order committee, but I was pulled from it, so that's why I'm just bringing it up just to ask. And so the field house meter base cabinet for $1,430, that's from Dominion, that we have to have that? Number 16?
Required by Dominion Power, under change order number 16?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe you want to explain that? I brought the experts up here, that's why I've got Mr. Davis, who, as you know, is our on-site, more than clerk of the works, but he's our on-site coordinator and supervisor, and of course, Mr. Hockaday, who's our director of maintenance. They each have more knowledge specifically of these things than I, so Mr. Hockaday, go ahead.
Yes, sir. The meter base that is there is original to the building, so it's over 40 years old. Once Dominion looked at it, as we were doing the upgrades, they would not restore power to the building with that original meter base. We had to replace it, so that was an additional cost that we're not planning on.
And that was the same thing with the roundabout, right? The soil in the
Yes,
bus
ma'am.
loop,
Yes,
right? And how about the demo of steel platforms?
There were some areas where the equipment set above the concrete floor grade on some steel platforms to get that back at the same grade. Once the equipment was removed, those platforms were then seen, so we paid extra to have those platforms removed to get everything back down to the same grade level.
Thanks for explaining. Just because with a lot of the communications that I've received with Cortland and CIP funds, I want to make sure that I'm asking questions that are pertinent to it so the public can understand exactly what we're doing and approving the funds. That's it. But thanks, that's all I had.
Yes, ma'am.
And just for future reference, even though consent agendas are in block, you can ask questions about particular things that you have concerns with before we vote, so we don't have to break them loose again. All right, so we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. And finally, 9.05, approval of sole source purchase of Lexa learning instructional materials. Ms. Carter and Ms. Cunningham. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Please excuse my voice, my allergies are messing up. Good evening, Chairman Braswell, school board members, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. As part of our division's strategic plan, staff continuously seeks resources and supports that enable us to better serve our student learning needs, as depicted in the slides previously from Dr. Flanard. Lexia Learning, a Rosetta Stone company, has been used in the county as an intervention tool since 2015, starting with 4 schools. And those 4 schools who initially started were Courthouse Road, Brock Road, Post Oak Middle, and Lee Hill. And most of those schools did not have full licenses. They had student seats. So some schools may have only purchased 100 seats as opposed to a full site license. At the end of 2017, 15 schools, many of which were Title I schools, used Lexia as an intervention tool. Last year, Spotsylvania County Public Schools devoted funding to all elementary schools and 2 middle schools. This funding allowed schools to provide Lexia learning supports to only 15% of each school's population to support reading intervention. So when you consider a school like Chancellor Middle or Post Oak Middle, you're talking about 100 student seats or 100 students out of an entire school building. This online program provides a personalized adaptive approach to advance targeted reading skills for K-12 students. Personalized instruction ensures that students receive the appropriate intensity and support to acquire the skills they need to become proficient readers. For students in need of extra assistance, Lexia provides a targeted scaffolded approach. Additionally, students have the opportunity to accelerate beyond their grade level skills as well. This year, staff proposes expanding to full site licenses for all elementary and middle school students, allowing all students at a school to be able to access this intervention tool or remediation or enrichment tool. Additionally, school and district level on-site and webinar training will be provided to ensure the success of this initiative. So the administration's recommendation is that the school board purchase full site licenses for this intervention initiative for all elementary and middle schools for the 2019-20 school year.
I would like to make a motion to approve sole source purchase of Lexia Learning instructional materials.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shelley, and it was seconded by Dr. Meyer. Discussion. Ms. Phelps.
I guess it's me again. So how many teachers are Lexis certified? Do they have to be Lexis certified?
No, it's an intervention program, so you have to be trained. So one of the things that we do as a school division is to work arm in arm with Lexia Learning to make sure that we are providing data protocol trainings and ongoing training for teachers to know how to best use this targeted program to reach student needs. So for example, this past year, all schools who used it had to do a mandatory data protocol meeting with Lexia to know what data sources you can report on or receive information from. And then each of the schools had to have 2 full site meetings with Lexia where representatives from the corporation came over and talked to us about how we were doing as a school, which students were really excelling, how we could work differently with our program. I was able to attend several of those, and it was very targeted, very specific to the needs of students in each building.
So do they provide the training with the cost?
Yes.
Lexia?
Yes, that cost is included.
So the protection and with the confidentiality and the privacy of the student records being tracked by a third party is why I'm asking these questions. Just a concern to, just especially with all the tricks and the scams that we've experienced recently. So that's just why I'm asking you these questions. So is this initiative going to be funded in the superintendent's year-over-year budget, or can we use one-time carryover funds for it? I don't know who to ask.
Actually, the board may recall that the Lexia proposal was part of the budget this past year, and so that as a reoccurring item, and so it was removed in an effort to work on closing that gap. And so it is before you this evening in an effort to use some one-time funding that would then be back before the board as budget time occurs, so that we could see if it could be
Included.
a reoccurring item for the budget.
So I remember Mr. Rosner, he donated $10,000 to our reading initiative a couple years ago. Am I correct? Is this the same program, or was it Fontella?
Mr. Rosner donated grant funds. We called them grant funds because he gave them to us, and it was specifically for Brock Road Elementary School as well as Wilderness Elementary School. And those were actually not part of Lexia. That was, I just lost the name of it.
Wasn't it
was
a
not
literacy?
Fontes and Pinnell. It was LLI, thank you.
LLI, okay, okay. I was just trying to get the differences of the programs. That's it. So those were my questions. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. We're now at 17.01. We will adjourn by unanimous consent.
Is that new business?
No.
Huh?
That is the new business, adjourned.